Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crossroads, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Dr. Alyssa Adams, a research scientist at Cross Labs, and I'll be your host for today. The Crossroads series is run by Cross Labs, a research institute here in Kyoto, Japan. We are supported by Cross Compass, one of the leading AI companies. The overall goal of Cross Labs is to understand the mind through computational research. We explore ideas about brain science, AI, information science, artificial life, changes in society, open-endedness, and so much more. Every month at Crossroads, we talk about intelligence and what parts of the sciences help us understand a bit more about what they are, how they are part of the world, and how we might create them from scratch. The cross in Crossroads refers to the bridge between many different disciplines in AI and A-Life, as well as industry and academia, because it takes a lot of different perspectives to tackle these big questions. This is our monthly fun forum where we invite cool and exciting speakers from a wide variety of backgrounds to share their research and to have an exciting discussion on those topics. As always, today will happen in two parts. First, the guest speaker, followed by a Q&A session from the live audience. And two, we will transition to a discussion from YouTube to Zoom. We will post the Zoom link later, so feel free to join us there. For the Q&A, we also have a Slido link that people can use to ask questions, or you can ask any questions in the YouTube chat. Now, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce our speaker. Today's speaker is Dr. Eduard Fosch-Villaronga from Leiden University. He is an ERC laureate and investigates the legal and regulatory aspects of robot and AI technologies, with a special focus on healthcare, governance, diversity, and privacy. He's the principal investigator of his ERC starting grant, Safe and Sound, harnessing experimentation to optimize the regulatory framing of healthcare robotic technologies. And he's also the PI of eLaw's contribution to the Horizon Europe bias, mitigating diversity biases of AI in the labor market, and is also a visiting scholar at Leiden University Medical Center. How are you doing today?
Hi, Alyssa. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me this morning and afternoon, depending where you are.
Perfect. It's so awesome to have you here, and we're super excited for your talk. So I am going to hand the floor over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So today I'm going to talk about different topics, but first of all, as already Alyssa introduced me, I'm Edward, and I go by the different keywords that you can see here, like work on law and robotics mainly, but I've been also trying to explore a little bit like how these human-machine interactions are actually challenging our society, and how the law and regulation has a say on that. And I am part of the eLaw Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden Law School, and we are located in the beautiful Netherlands, where there are a lot of canals and a lot of history. And Leiden University is the oldest university that we have in the Netherlands. And Leiden Law School, it is now located in a building that used to be actually the physics department, and is actually very well known because actually Einstein was visiting a scholar there, but it is also known by the name of Kamerlingh Onn, who was a Nobel Prize and actually created the coldest place on Earth at some point, because he managed to get to the absolute zero temperatures there. So our center, even if it looks a little bit new, it is actually one of the first centers on law and digital technologies in Europe, and we are a very diverse group of researchers in which we cover a lot of different topics, going like from children's rights, from data protection and privacy, artificial intelligence, responsibility, gender and technology, and also we have mathematicians, and so basically we're like a very large team, and we educate in different programs also on these topics. on law and technology at different levels. And we also have like a lot of different research projects. So just like I wanted like to introduce you a little bit like on some of these projects, but basically like we work on, for instance, trying to mitigate hate offline and online. We also try to understand like how artificial intelligence can be applied for public safety, and how we can create an ecosystem of trust within these. We're also in a project trying to work on defense, and like how we can ensure responsible usage of AI within this domain. And we've been working a lot on the legal and ethical aspects of technologies, especially on data protection and privacy. And if anyone in the audience has questions on that, is very much welcome. And just like as a finalizing this short introduction of our research in our center, like we also work on this project on mitigating diversity biases in AI in the labor market. We realize that a lot of these algorithms may reproduce existing biases against certain genders and sexual orientations, and we're trying to fight to mitigate those. But today I want to talk a little bit like on this world of law and AI, and in concrete, like with a project that I just got. So I will be working from now and the next upcoming 5 years on Safe and Sound, which basically tries to harness experimentation to optimize regulatory framing of healthcare robot technology. So I'm going to talk to you today about this. So exoskeleton technology are those robotic devices that actually help wheelchair users and also stroke rehabilitation and spinal cord injury patients to stand up and work on their ability to walk. And throughout the years, these devices have been improving light a lot, and they have now been considering much more lightweight. And thanks to these, the users of these devices, they can get much more exercise and get a little bit better, like on their conditions. No? The problem is that this technologies is quite new, so there's a lot of different research groups that they are working on those, and it is a little bit sometimes unclear, like what are the different safeguards that they have been following in order to be safe. So the European Union, they created one project a time ago, the Eurobench project, that actually was aiming to create the first benchmark framework for different robots, including exoskeletons, but also humanoid robots. The idea was to bring together different researchers and startups and build different testing zones with different experiments, so that then all the different companies could test their devices, so that they would ensure sort of common safeguard baseline respected now by all of their devices. So for instance, as we can see here, that for instance, the robot would work on uneven terrains, or would be able to climb stairs, or for instance, in different platforms. No. And these are the testing facilities that we actually used there. Now, what we wanted to do in our project, and together with Carlos and Hadassah, who were part of the research team that we had a project within this Eurobench project, because we thought, oh, that is actually a good idea for us, and not only to see how these testing facilities are actually improving their devices, but actually like how then these tests could actually like provide some knowledge about inconsistencies in the law, and like how frameworks are working on those. So the goal that we had in that moment was to investigate to what extent these test beds can generate policy relevant data for speeding the creation, revision, or discontinuation of norms governing robot technology. And what we were doing here is because some of these frameworks that we had, they are quite new, like there's not that much knowledge on that. What one of the aspects that we wanted to do, it is to actually work on the fear of falling. So imagine you having been walking for 7 years, for instance, and then you are being asked like to stand up and walk. So it might be possible that you are afraid of falling, and this fear of falling may constrain the performance of the device. And these psychological aspects are not usually captured by safety standards, which usually are focused on physical safety. But also we wanted to know a little bit more on protective stops. So what is the role of them? And protective stops and emergency stops are these big red buttons which stop the operation of a robot if the the robot is not actually working correctly. The thing is that if you think about it, a person that might have a health condition might be using a robot. Then if you press the button, then the person may risk of falling, and it is not very clear what are the safeguards that we need to put in place to ensure that the person is safe. And then once we have activated the device, it is actually also not clear what can we do in order to reactivate the motion. No? So with all of these two things, so we said, okay, so we're going to do some testing in order to understand like this fear of falling and also the protective stop, so that then what we can do it is to generate knowledge geared towards supporting a policy change, no, like to provide a little bit more of like context, like within like the policy that govern these devices. So what we did is to bring different subjects, like to do the experiment. And this is Joseph Luis, who had been in a wheelchair for 7 years, even if unfortunately he believed that only happened 7 months ago. And he came together with his wife, Gloria, and his son, Jordi, who together like came and also Jordi like participated into some of these experiments. And then we also had like other experiment subjects. We had like Hadassah with us that she also did the experiments. The thing is that when we started then preparing the tests with the subjects, Hadassah was complaining largely about the device. The device was making a lot of noises and actually was incredibly difficult for her to walk with it. And actually, she was complaining that the device was hurting herself. And the two other women that you see in the images, they were also saying that this was normal and that they also happened to have these problems. And well, that started like to sort of like indicate, well, that like some subjects like were complaining more than the other one. But the thing is that then when we started like looking at the data, then we started realizing that the female subject actually experienced to have more stress levels within the experiments that she was supposed to do, and that at the same time, like she was also spending way more energy in order to perform the experiments. That for the female subject. But then like we wanted to do the experiment with the subject with the condition, and then we realized that we could not even go forward with the experiments because actually the device could not sustain the person, like because it was weighing a lot, which is unsurprising because it is a wheelchair user that does not get to have a lot of exercises. So it is normal that the person is overweight. But then as you can see in the video, then you can see that we had like a safety hook in the ceiling to support the motion. Basically, we could not go ahead. And this like sort of like started like for us, like thinking, well, we wanted to conduct the experiments in order to understand like the fear of falling and also the protective stops. But actually we started like thinking, well, but we cannot even go ahead with these experiments because we realized that there are like some constraints that are preventing us from going forward. So what we did is to have a look at the regulatory framework of this. We started like seeing, okay, so like what are the laws like that are governing these devices? And what we identified is that there was an industrial standard on personal care robots that actually was devised in 2014 to govern the safety of different robots that compared to the industrial applications, that usually the safety was being handled by separating the robot from the human operator. In this case, robots that they are inserted in serviceable contexts actually challenge this approach. And well, you need to have the safety being addressed in a different manner, because of course these robots are meant to interact with humans. So they cover different aspects for Mobile 7 robots, which is a robot that can handle objects and exchange information. For person carrier robots that transport people from point A to point B. But then also for physical assistant robots or exoskeletons. And they are usually because geared towards uh, understanding the physical safety of those devices, because of course harming someone is like an ever-present concern. And if you can imagine that a person like having like an exoskeleton, for instance, like may fall down, like that might be an irreparable harm to the person. However, other aspects like psychological aspects, for instance, no, as we said, like they are not that much taken into consideration. However, when we do interact with machines, it is not only that you interact with these embodied technologies only, but actually that you are interacting with them, and there's like actually cognitive processes being intertwined with these interaction. There's also the aspects that these systems are cyber physical, no? So like something that happens at the cyber level, like can have an impact in the real world. But then also at the same time, like there is like a temporal dimension. So it can be that the continuous usage of some of these devices may hamper the may have an impact on the person that cannot be detected beforehand. And of course these may have further implications like on the societal dimension, so like to understand like to what extent the future of healthcare is going to be looking like when we are going to be able to use robotic technology that can extend the work of therapies, or on the contrary, also like providing like new ways of dealing with some of these aspects. um, the problem with us was that actually the standard does not account for diversity. And when I mean diversity, I mean about the practice or quality of including and involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, of different genders and sexual orientations. What we started realizing is that although the standard was geared towards ensuring the safety of these devices, actually there might, well, our experiments started indicating that there are gender and sex considerations that actually, if they are not considered in robot development, they can harm users, and they can actually like pose a lot of problems. And the thing is that this ISO was meant in 2014 and was said, if you can look at the below in the paragraph, it says future editions of this international standard might include more specific requirements on particular types of personal robots, as well as more complete numeric data for different categories of people, children, elderly persons, or pregnant women. The standard already, like the community that like build this standard, which is the framework that actually frames these devices, already foresaw that there are certain categories of users that may have the need to deserve like some further attention towards this, but this was not accounted in that moment. The majority of the devices that they have been built have been surrounded adults, usually healthy, usually men, and if for women, usually slim and not overweight, which is actually a little bit different than how like wheelchair a typical average user wheelchair a user may look like. And the problem is that with the different categories of users, also, especially for instance in pediatric robotics, um, children do not need to restore a lost function. They need to learn how to walk. So the approach on like how we're going to be developing exoskeletons is completely different than those for grown-ups. And children, for instance, might also outgrow the devices in a way that it is completely different as is with adult populations, and that having adjustable devices only might not be enough. Um, so all of these started like supporting like some research that then I conducted with a colleague of mine, like on gender studies, like to really understand that if we really want to have technology that matches the user needs, then we do need to have a much more intersectional approach towards it, and then integrate the different characteristics of all of us in order to really provide technology that actually like serves the purpose for what they were meant for. Just for you to know, standards have a 5-year revision time, and this standard was revised in 2020 without actually any further edition. So as you can see with this first part of the presentation, you already can imagine that what I'm trying to convey here is that many times we try to blame, in a way, robot developers because they are not accounting for diversity, intersectionality, and aspects that they're actually ensuring the safety of the operations of the robots. But that actually what we see throughout our work is that actually the laws and the frameworks that we have actually are not providing enough guidance for developers, for them like to actually do devices that actually are safe and sound. So with that information in mind, we sort of had a step back and said, okay, we need to have a little bit more of information of what is it going on with males and females. And because we had like a very limited amount of subjects, so what we did is actually to have a much more bigger pool of people. We had like 16 subjects, and I know that they are not a lot, but actually this is one of the difficulties that you have, like to really have a lot of subjects to do the experiments. But at least like we wanted like to start looking at it like with these gender and sex lenses. And what we realized is that already out of these 16 subjects, 3 subjects could not participate the experiments for diversity and inclusion barriers. One of it being that we had a male subject with a large physical completion, which actually exceeded the capacity of the robot. So this would mean that actually the exoskeletons we were using actually might not be working that much well for wheelchair populations, which tend to be more overweight than average. A female subject with a large breast region because of the robot having a body trunk support. Then the problem that we have is that if then the females do not have like a large trunk, then they cannot place the breast over the device, and if they can do so, they hurt themselves like a lot, like into this part of the thorax, and actually also like in the pelvis, like in the second one, like with the small physical completion. So like what we already started realizing is that basically, although when we are doing the experiments, there are many objective measurements being taken in place, like how tall people are, like the arm width, etc. There were other aspects considering also pelvis and breast size that were not taken into account, and that actually represented an impediment for women to do the experiments. And then this is just like a couple of examples of like how we were trying to do the experiments. Like this is on the protective stops. So basically we were trying like to push the button like in different moments of the operation, like because we wanted like the subject like to tell us how would they react if the robot would suddenly stop. So in a way we were having a lot of fun, like just like trying like to push like the little buttons. And that is one on the sit to stand. So like if you are getting up of the chair, like whether you can stop it or not. And the other one where we're trying to do it is like to walk like around the platform like in an uneven terrain, and then like pressing the button also from time to time, like also to understand like whether then the person would actually be okay with it, and like what were the reaction times, whether the person would feel safe or not, whether there could be like some yeah, further safeguards needed in place. So what we could conclude from those 2 weeks is that subjects experience protective stops and their safety differently. So we see a tendency of males being actually less afraid of the protective stop than the female subjects. But actually, what we also realize is that there are apparent intersectional differences between subjects which are currently not accommodated by exoskeleton design or test beds. And that is actually something quite revealing, I would say, because this could be the first time as we have seen that, for instance, we have bikes for male and for female, which actually account for the anatomical differences with female. We could start seeing also an evidence that also in exoskeleton technology, these diversity considerations it could be important to be taken into account. And well, and then like other aspects that we had, like that there are critical moments in which a protective stop would significantly endanger the user more than a continuation of the operation. This we mean that when the user is, for instance, climbing the stairs, having the protective stop in place would actually like be extremely endangering for the person, and that the cyber physical nature of the exoskeleton may actually uh, may need to be accounted. No, like we saw like that in some moments that there was like a bug into the system, and that like would actually trigger like a sort of difficult way of walking for the person. Um, just other observations is that the time in which like people can actually maintain the position in some of these experiments is no longer than 2 minutes, and that was only with healthy subjects. So actually what we because of the nature of the experiments, we didn't have what the project was calling non-healthy subjects, which we somehow disagree with the terminology, but that's how we had it. That it is also true that if you walk a bit faster, it may augment the confidence that you have, and that we need like to see like different approaches on how we deal with the protective stop. But this is just like for the protective stop. What I wanted to share with you in here is that, well, we always say that the sugar industry is not interested in your health. Like what I usually try to mean with this is that it is important like to understand that that there are sometimes industrial interest in that are the narrative is more like supported by a return of investment storyline, in which sometimes that might prevent developers from seeing the value in having much more diverse robots, but at the same time, like that might actually, on the long term, like account a lot for the, and that some of the problems that we see may come as a result of the configuration, maybe of the research themes that we currently have, in which they are not that diverse. So that we know that diversity improves group thinking. So it would be possible that the configuration of the research teams are not very diverse. But the thing is that for exoskeleton research, actually, it is crucial that we do take into consideration not only the male and female perspective, but also which would relate like to sex, and of course the intersex community would have to be also accounted for it. But of course, like we would have to know a little bit more like on transgender people and so on. Also, like much more research is needed there. But we know also that female have like a longer life expectancy, and also they might be also much more prone to use some of these devices. So like that is actually very important. And of course, like we wonder like why women like are way more live longer, no? So for very various reasons. So why is this important? And I am concluding here like a little bit a little bit farther. Like it is because when we present robots as technical solutions, we also construct normality. This means that um, it seemed that the women that they were conducting our experiments felt normal that they were being hurt by the devices, which actually that was something quite revealing. That the lack of diversity is beyond a safety concern, also erasure, exclusion, and silencing. No, it prevents like from people from different sexes and genders like to be accounted for. And that we cannot disregard that minorities have throughout human history experience and that actually throughout robotics, this can actually be addressed or actually exacerbated. But that we see that as in other parts of the research, like with considering, for instance, the dummies in safety, car crash accidents, and also in drug research, we see increasingly the need on like how potentially robotics may once more like exacerbate these. I guess that yeah, at Cross Labs, like you are much also focused on artificial intelligence per se, but like we see also the very important need on how these gender considerations are being disregarded most of the times in robotics. No, like we see a lot of smart speakers with having female names and like with female voices. No, like exacerbating gender stereotypes about what women should or not should do, no, and that should stop. And just like as main takeaways, these gender and sex considerations are not always considered in exoskeleton design. We see that it is not only a matter of having adjustable devices. Like we see that women are being more stressed and also having to spend more energy in performing the tasks, and their total experience is different, which would actually suggest that potentially there should be like maybe more effort into these. But then what we realize also is that also the test and the evaluation methods have not been implemented yet broadly, like in different body types, but also that the safety standards and the regulation that we have in this, like also should have explicit recommendations to integrate safeguards for different categories of users, no? But then what we see actually is that it's no longer enough to say oh, the robot developers like have a much more monodisciplinary approach in which like we are not taking into consideration certain legal and ethical aspects. No, but what we see is that also the technical norms that we have that in theory are trying like to have the safety standards, they're also not fit for purpose, and that needs to be changed. And this is important, and I want to say it because oftentimes the industry, of course, devises these technical norms in order to create a bit of order within this realm. But it is important that also in those conversations in which, especially we're talking about the safety, targeted groups and also affected users are being part of the table. I mean, it can be also patient organizations and advocates that actually represent these groups so that they can also be there. If you want to read a little bit more on this, we actually like presented like these results in a very recent paper, actually, like from this month also. But I can put it there like into the chat if you want. But I just like wanted like to thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions to this presentation, which is law and artificial intelligence, but like in a very concrete example on how this yeah well, it's being realized like in our daily lives.
Wow, thank you so much. That was absolutely eye-opening. Wow. I honestly I couldn't believe in the study with the 16 patients or subjects that you were working with, already 3 of them were unable to participate in the experiments. Yeah, my heart went out for those people because but it was also really illustrative that like this is a big problem in this field right now. And wow, I
Yeah,
can't.
thank you, Alyssa. Yeah, like and I see that actually like until we don't do the experiments and then actually we don't see these, then we cannot anticipate that these are problems, right? Like for us, what was most surprising is that women actually felt that it was quite normal, that like it hurt a little bit because, well, yeah, of course they have the breast, like I said, like, no, but like then the device should account for having like a place for you to actually, that the device actually is fits your body actually,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's one that feeds right into the question that I had is how can you see these types of devices being manufactured for people who have very specific needs for every individual? Because it seems like at least from what I've seen, it seems like every individual has very unique specific needs, and it's really important for those needs to be met. So how are you imagining that, I guess, that can be met through manufacturing? Like, can you go to a particular website? Do patients need to work with their doctors? How can, yeah, I guess like how can that process be a as painless as possible and by lowering as many barriers as possible for the patients?
Yeah, well, yeah. So first of all, I think that we are moving towards what we call personalized medicine, and I think that it is like a clear understanding that the average user and the average patient is not representative, like of how do we react and are affected by drugs, by treatments, and so, and that actually there's a lot of different aspects that take yeah, that have an important role in how we're going to be dealing with a certain disease and disorder and a condition. And it's only quite recent actually that there are some research that is being published in Nature, British Medical Journal, etc., on how these sex and gender considerations actually are being taken into account. So first of all, I think that what it is important is that we start having a much more profound realization that these aspects are a must and that they cannot be disregarded. And how we can do this in order to try to have like the less barriers as possible is to actually have a common front in which these narratives are being integrated in the different levels which I introduced before. So it needs to be from the manufacturer level, so like ideating ways in which we could have fast prototyping, 3D printing, facilitating the pieces and modular approaches in which then like different pieces like can be put together so that then like these certain aspects are being accommodated. then I would think that it is important that the more and more there is a health policy within these the different countries. No, this represent actually like an access barrier, no, which is actually can be facilitated by the policy, no, and like how the different healthcare systems are going to be putting forward some of these devices that actually we know by now that actually are new, no, and I think that healthcare systems are also very much constrained about like how much uh, yeah, resources they have in order to care for their population. So I think that in this case exoskeletons provide something that is new and unique that was not provided before, and is really the potential of this is unimaginable. um, but then also what we do need is also to have a much more robust and inclusive standardization activities in which like we also bring together all of these. So by having this front, then the idea is that then the user, which is already in a disadvantage because it has a condition, then some of these barriers can be removed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what are your hopes for what this technology will look like in the next 5 years or the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think that the well, I've been working on this I think for nearly 10 years now, and the many subjects were reporting feelings of like a Christmas tree, you know, like with a lot of sensors and a lot of yeah, it was extremely cumbersome. So we
Mm.
are arriving to a moment in which like these devices are very lightweight and they are work in a very seamless manner. I would very much like hope that for the five next years, like we can very much work into two ways, like one on soft exoskeleton, so like something that can be very much more wearable, no, as to honor like the word of wearable robotics, so that they can really be integrated in a way we do. And this is important because all the psychological impact that this has like on you, know, that you are clearly having a device, no, already impacts the users. And I think that there's, if we go a little bit more futuristic, I think that actually what we will start like seeing a lot is in how we are going to be integrating these exoskeletons to maybe endoskeletons, so like in a way like on how we could integrate these within our bodies. Like of course this is a little bit much more on the futuristic side, and it might not be now as easier as like to incorporate like one of these devices. But I think that this is where some research groups that I am in contact with in Madrid and in Chicago, they are really trying to pursue this vision in which it will be then integrated with our bodies.
Wow, that would be amazing. I mean, that's definitely very sci-fi, but yeah, it's not difficult to imagine in the next 10, 20 years or something. That's really incredible.
Yeah, but if you think, Alisa, no, how until now, like we could not even imagine like a wheelchair user to stand up and walk. Of course, it is not walking as going to the supermarket, no, like the technology is not there yet, but there's an incredible amount of progress like being done on that. There's also like a lot of progress on brain computer interfaces, like so how we can use also our brains in order to power these, and I think that it is just a matter of time, a lot of research, so like kudos like to a lot of the researchers that they're behind this, because they're doing amazing work on this.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of this brain technology interfaces, I'm going to head over to the Slido because the first question there is the problem. Oops, I accidentally marked it as answered. Oops, what did I do that for? I don't know why. Sometimes I just. Um, oh, the question was, Well, the question was, how is this technology going to be related to Neuralink, perhaps? Is there how do you see that working, and how do you think things such as safety and the safety red buttons, how does that relate to those kinds of technologies?
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I know that there's a lot of an interest on like having the brain-computer interface to work. No, we need to know that the majority of the users of these technologies may be partially or completely paralyzed. So having like an interface that like can actually bridge this gap, like it seems to be like a logical step for a lot of part of the population. And of course, there will have to be a lot of safety considerations into that respect, because we know also that the devices, for instance, are good at climbing stairs, but they're not that much yet on descending stairs. And there might be like a lot of physical barriers considering that. So I guess that having a closer look to how this the context of application like is being integrated with the device, because that's also important. No, it's not only the device but also like where is this inserted. I think that that actually shows a lot of promise, if of course the safeguards are being taken into account.
Mhm. Yeah. And okay, I'll move to another question from Olaf. Um, he says that I like the idea of faster feedback loops with designers and manufacturers. Can we do better than working in closer and shorter? Can we do better than working in closer and shorter product cycles? For example, out in InReach.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that we could definitely do better. I think that that is one of the main problems. No, like a lot of people are talking about having uh, uh, one second. Sorry, the working from home has this. Yeah, so I think that actually a lot of people like are working towards like having like a much more inclusive approach, no, and bringing people together. And so but that actually like creates a longer chain that needs to be way. So I think that actually trying like to work on different ways in which we could streamline these processes, and that we could be ready like for having these collaborative platforms also with affected users. That is something I still see a lot of work needs to be done in that area.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, we also have a question. Do exoskeletons have a red safety bottom? Maybe button bottom?
Yeah, yeah, they do. They need to have. So this is actually by law. There is the requirement to actually being able to stop the operation in case it is causing harm, or that needs to be yeah, it needs to be stopped. Our innovation or like the contribution to this project was basically to expand on the knowledge of protective and emergency stops, because it seems very clear, no, and in a theoretical level it seems very normal to have something to stop, no, if something is not working. However, when we it is not the same as in a as in a computer, like, or as in a big machine. When we have a robot that it is being worn by a user, and then we are is helping that user perform a task, then it needs to be also that taken into consideration. No, so they do have, but like the question on how this button needs to be, who it is reached, no, like because some of these buttons are actually placed in the back of the person, which means that this creates a dependency on someone else that it is behind, like in order to stop it, which is not bad per se, because there are some of these devices that they are meant to be worked with therapists, but that also is a complication, no? Like if the user then like is not in control over the stop of the motion of the robot. So there needs to be a discussion on what is the best way to integrate these stopping devices so that it is ensured the safety of the operation, but of course the safety of the user.
And that sounds like a really complicated thing, especially in the example that you gave earlier of going up and down the stairs. You don't want to press that red safety button in the middle of that sort of operation.
Yeah, and that is only if you have the power to activate it, right? Like, but imagine that there is like a problem, and then the button is activated for some reason, no? Like, and then what is it exactly that you do in that situation? No?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like there needs to be a lot of work done there.
You don't want to be in that situation, no?
Right, exactly. Let's go to okay, Olaf says thank you. Embodiment in the sense, embodiment in the broad sense includes cognitive and cultural features and shifts further with AI. How do we ensure safety consciousness always follows?
Yeah, I think that is something that is currently not being that much accounted for. I think that at least from what we see in 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 my domain in the law is that it's very much a safety narrative concerning the physical aspect, but like all of the cognitive parts, psychological aspects are not following. I was serving at the I'm serving at the European Commission on the revision of the General Product Safety Directive, like in light of the AI, and that is one of the very main topics that we actually put forward, and that is what we try like to actually have that future pieces of legislation would account for that, because it's no longer the case that actually products may affect us physically, but that actually like the interaction with them actually entails a lot of these psychological aspects that are not very much accounted for. And I think that opens a lot of avenues for research in this area on safety, that it is an encompassing safety both in physical and psychological aspects.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that you pay attention to physical and psychological aspects as well, because I think they're both extremely important.
Yeah, and it's not very well known, so that's why it is important. So basically, my ERC starting grant is going to be working on this. So the idea is that there's not that much research understanding which factors are actually a safety concern. So what we see throughout our experiments is that perhaps sex and gender considerations are a safety concern. So like we need to take into consideration those. We also see that psychological aspects are part of it. We still need to see what are the different factors that actually are important in this, no? And I think that the importance of my project of ERCs is not that much only on exoskeletons, but the idea that different types of robot technologies, artificial intelligence, metaverse, all of them, they do need and require further research into understanding how safe they are and whether we need to do something about it to strengthen it. No?
Absolutely. And speaking of standards and protections and safety, how protected are these devices from things like hacking and other software concerns and vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so that is something that we also had seen. In theory, there's also some standards that they are like governing on these issues. Usually, they operate in an internal setting, in which it is extremely difficult, like for outside attacks to have. But the increasing use of cloud robotics, no, and the use of cloud services for robotics, the use of robot as a service, no, also. So like the more robots are interconnected with the internet and other robotics, the more they will be prone to be subject to this. And since we have seen also how cars have been hacked, no, I remember like was the main owners of the car, of the Jeep, like I think that it was already like in house, no, but they were trying like to access it, and that revealed that certain vulnerabilities. I think that it is exactly what will happen. So for now, these devices are not that much connected to the internet, but I would imagine that many of these robots, not for exoskeletons, maybe perhaps yes, but actually for yeah, no, actually for exoskeletons also, like because like it may be possible that then you want to have like devices that, for instance, remember your gait pattern, and that they include like different models in order to have like a real time yeah, gait, no, that adjusts to your. And so I do also believe that that these topics will have an increasing yeah, importance in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll move to the last question before we head on over to the discussion. And Olaf asks, for every new technology, perhaps in particular for the autonomous ones, is there a period of trial and error, and how to reduce the gap for legal and responsible use?
Yeah, so in a way, mm, so that is why yeah, the role of testing zones for me are of vital importance, no. So the thing is that what we see is that a lot of these products are being inserted into the market, at least in the European Union, because the CE mark, it's 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 um it's a process in which you can evaluate it in-house. So of course there are like standardization agencies that check whether your product conforms with certain standards. But actually it is possible to put a robot into the market that, as we have seen like into this presentation, that actually conforms with a standard, that the standard does not provide the safety parameters, no. So like this would mean that then the robot, it is in the market, but that actually is not safe to use. So for me, I think that having testing zones in which they reproduce real life circumstances, I think that would be ideal, because then it could be integrated, then the feedback from those into the better and improvement of the devices, no. So in a way, yes, but once you put the device into the market, this trial and error actually is no longer possible in a way, like because like you are responsible for your device, no, and you need to ensure that the yeah the device is safe to use, no.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, so everybody who is doing right now, if you go to the Slido, there's one, it's not really a question, but it has the link for the Google Meet that we're going to go to continue the discussion. But so that concludes our live stream of this event. Thank you so much. This was really exciting and really eye-opening and absolutely incredible. We absolutely loved having you on behalf of Cross Labs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll see everybody at the next we call it Google Meet. So definitely grab the link from the Slido and we'll see you over there. Bye.
Bye.